What's up, tribe? How you guys doing? Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I hope you like this video. This is going to be your review for VH1 Family Reunion Love and Hip Hop Edition Season 1, Episode 5. So, somebody thought it was a good idea to have Bible study after the block party, okay? And somebody also thought it was a good idea to put Scrappy in charge of it. Now, Scrappy said, which y'all might not know about my past, is that my daddy is a preacher, which I find to be interesting because we found out later on in this episode that your mama was a pimp at one time. But I ain't mad. I ain't mad and I ain't judging. But he decided he wanted to have a Bible study. Now, he said for a lot of people may not know that spirituality is important to me. And so, listen, I was here for it, okay? I was here for it because I said you never know somebody's faith and ain't nobody gonna question somebody else's faith. I was here for all of it. Scrap said that my daddy was a preacher and I feel like I got a little bit of that in me. I was 100% here for it until Scrap said, open your books to the first book of the Philippines. Sir, sir, sir. I can't do nothing with that one, Scrap. I can't. Woo! I can't. Now the ladies and the gentlemen were there. Half of them was tired. Half of them was drunk. They was trying to make it work. They was trying to have that moment because they got to film this scene. They got to get through it. Jock was half asleep. Trick ass was asleep. Trina was drunk. Listen, and tired. Listen. Again, beautiful sentiment. But in this moment, we got a couple of testimonies, right? We got a couple of testimonies, and they went around the room, and I'm trying to think who went first. I don't know who went first because it ain't matter. The most important one we got to was when Mendices got up to speak, and he was like, "Listen, a year ago, I was, this time a year ago, I was in jail, and my past might be a little different from some of the people in this room. I just sort of have, growing up in the 80s, I've been shot, I think he said 3 times, stabbed like 12, 14 times. He said I grew up and, sometimes I was hungry. Sometimes I sold drugs to eat. So, of course, his mama there, and she like, you did what? You would what? And so mama was feeling. She was in her feelings. And it's her story to tell. It's her testimony. It's her story to tell. I mean, it's his testimony, excuse me, and his story to tell. And I feel like we can't, let me rewind. So Mendices is telling a story. His mom gets offended, and Mendices was like, listen, this is my version of the story. Like, this is no disrespect to you. And I think where Mendices was trying to go with the story was come back around to who his mother is today. You know what I'm saying? But she got offended and she got up and actually wanted to join. She said, well, I'm going to come up here with you because I want to jump in where I feel like the story ain't going where it need to be going. I'm going to jump in this. And so Mendices was like, she said, what you mean what about grandma? Grandma was across the street. He was like, we was kids. Ain't nobody going across the street. Like, we was in the projects. Like, I remember knocking on the door to the neighbor's house to eat, to get some food. And she was talking about, he was saying basically, you was out there doing your thing. You were a young mom. I ain't judging you and I ain't mad at you. I'm telling my story. And so she gets upset and it becomes a whole thing, because she's offended and feel like he's basically trying to put her business out there to these people that she don't know, when really he was putting his business out there and trying to tell his story about his life and how he grew up and why he did what he did. And he said, listen, at the end of the day, you know, we grew up in the 80s. The 80s and 90s. You were a young mom. You was out doing your thing. You was out partying. And I ain't mad at you and I ain't judging you for it. But at the end of the day, that's part of my story. Like it's part of my story. Later on in the evening, he went to go talk to her, or she came to talk to him, and she admitted as much. You know, I was young, I was out there running the streets, and I was doing what I was doing. Now, I feel like what we was skirting around was that she was out there on crack. She was a crackhead, okay? It was the 80s, it was the 90s, you was a damn crackhead, okay? It wasn't a little bit of weed, it wasn't a little bit of... you was a crackhead. And it's okay. That's a lot of people's testimony from the 80s and the 90s. That's what happened to our people. Black neighborhoods were infiltrated with the shit. Okay? Ain't nobody judging you, Judy. But at the end of the day, what you can't do is take away his voice and his story. That's his story. Something had that boy out there selling drugs. And so Judy was upset by it, you know. And Erica Dixon later on in the episode, you know, she was talking to Yandy about it, and she was like, listen, I went through that with my mom. Like, I had to remind my mom, you was out there partying and doing drugs, and I was eating sugar and butter sandwiches because there wasn't no other food in the house. You can't take away my experience. You can't tell me what my story is. You can't tell me what happened to me. That's my story. You don't have to like it, but it is what it is. And I think sometimes, you know, Scrappy said later on in the episode that he used to get upset with Mama D because she would tell stories and include him, and he used to tell her, don't put me in that. That's your story. Don't put me in it. That's you. Don't put my name in it. He said, but it was in that moment when that happened with Mendici and his mom that he understood that in Mendici telling his story, it wasn't disparaging his mom. It was talking about his experience. And he wasn't trying to embarrass his mother. He wasn't trying to put his mother's business out there. He was just saying, this is what happened to me. Now, Judy, you done went and admitted that you was down to the disco fever, and you was getting drunk and high, and you was partying, and you weren't a good mom. Maybe you was an absentee mom. So why you in your bag about it? Well, what you in your bag about is that you didn't want him telling everybody else, and you was embarrassed by it. That's what you're mad about. Later on, now, Paris also gave her testimony, and she talked about her self-esteem and how in her journey and that, yeah, it's sort of like a Tears of the Clown situation where, yeah, everybody sees Paris as this happy-go-lucky, ha-ha-ha, having a good time kind of person, but behind that, there's a lot of pain, and she's had to work through that and had to build up her self-esteem, you know, through that process. Scrap also took that time to go and speak to Erica Dixon. And basically what they decided was that they do want to work on their communication. They do want to work on their relationship. Even though Amani is 15, the last thing they want is for Amani to feel like she can manipulate them because they don't talk. And I said, you know what? That's a smart thing. That's a thing to think about because unfortunately, that's what happens. You know, she's 15, 16 years old. And what you don't want is to find yourself in a situation where you get, well, daddy know that I'm going to such and such. Well, mommy know that I'm going to such and such because mommy and daddy don't talk to each other and she knows it. And they had a conversation and Scrappy said to Erica, he said, you know, when I saw you and my wife talking, I was so proud of you and so proud of my wife in that moment. The fact that after everything that has happened and everything that we have gone through, that y'all could sit down and have a conversation. And that's what really made me say, listen, I need to kind of get up out my feelings and I need to talk to this woman. And so it was a good conversation. I mean, again, at the end of the day, they agreed to work on their communication. Ain't nobody say that we're going to be friends and inviting each other to Sunday dinner. But for the purposes of making sure that we are doing what's in the best interest of our child and not allowing any manipulation, any blurred lines in there, that we can that we are at least communicating. And you know what? I think that's all Mama D wanted, and I was glad to see it. Glad to see it happen. Um, I sort of went through a lot of that in that little conversation. Y'all, why is Ray J here? Why is Ray J here? The next day, Carly got to host the event, and she was hosting the I think it's like the first day of Carnival. I forgot the name of it. I ain't write it down. But what it boils down to is she explained later, which it was very much connected to um, slavery. You know, the Europeans went to the Caribbean and they enslaved the Caribbean just like, they did here, in the United States and in other places, and Trinidad and Tobago. And the slaves would, this was a celebration where the slaves would go with the paint and the water and everything, and they would mock their masters. That was their way of mocking their slave masters. Slaves were very, very, very what's the word I'm looking for? Creative in celebrations and in mockery. Okay, and so they had a good time. They were throwing the paint on each other and having a good time, and they was listening to soca music and all that good stuff. So it was a moment. Ray J ass was not participating at all. I don't know why he's here, but it was a moment. It was cool. Trick Daddy and April had this real awkward moment where she was supposed to be helping him work out. Y'all know good and damn well Trick Daddy ain't working out. All he wanted to do was watch April work out, okay? And April, kind of sort of got offended by Trick flirting with her and wanting to see her work out. And, I felt like that was a moment for her to just try to call him a sexist again. Listen, let's be clear. Trick Daddy is old school. Sexist, okay, if that's the word you want to use, fine. But it is what it is. Like, that's how, listen, we know who he is. We know what we dealing with. Mendices and Scrap had a moment where they could, again, talk about their shared experiences growing up, and Scrap said, listen, I grew up basically in a trap house. Like, my mama did what she had to do. My mama was a pimp. She had 4 or 5 women working for her, and sometimes we couldn't sleep in our own bed because they was doing what they do in the bed. He said, and as a child, that was my experience. That's what it was, because my mother did what she had to do to raise us. And I saw a picture. Scrap posted a picture today online of his mama with, I guess it was with her hoes, honey. I said, I know that's right, Mama D. Now that's the story you need to be telling, Mama D. That's what you need to be telling us, okay? Anyway. And Mendices was saying, listen, this is my experience, and I wasn't trying to embarrass my mom, but at the end of the day, I was running drugs before I even knew what I was doing. The neighborhood drug dealers had me as a mule, and I didn't even know what I was doing. I didn't know what was in the bag, and I was taking from one place to the next. Like, that's what I did. That was my life. That's how I grew up. Not because I wanted to, but because those were the cards that I was dealt. And so it's never meant to embarrass her. I love my mother. I'm proud of my mother. She conquered that. She became a better person. She got off the drugs. She got out of that life, And if she had let me finish, I wish she had let me finish and tell my story. Then I would have been able to, maybe she would have heard that from me. Now, the other thing was, after Carly got done talking at the party, Judy started talking, and she's from, I always pronounce it wrong, Guyana, South America, and I hope I said that right. And she talked about growing up, with no TV, and they didn't even have shoes on their feet, but how they learned so much, and they had, life was great, and you don't know what you don't. If you never had it, you don't know you don't have it, And while she was talking and sort of telling her story, Mendices and Yandy were kind of giggling over in the corner, and Mama D said something to the effect of, when you're don't do that. Don't do that, because when you're talking, you want somebody to listen to you while you're talking. And Mendices was like, I'm not being disrespectful. And her mom was like, see, Yandy is teaching him to disrespect his mom. And she was like, and I'm not. She was like, I'm doing that? That's what I'm doing? Yes, you teaching her to disrespect your mom. And Mendices, and Yandy left. She said, I'm not doing this. And so she walked off, and that's where the episode ended. Listen, I feel like Judy's still mad from the night before, and Judy already got some feelings about Yandy, and she's gonna use this as an excuse to let it all hang out and to let her anger out about Yandy. So we'll see. Anyway, y'all let me know what y'all think. Drop it in the comments, please.